At approximately 6:45 in the morning, December 4th, 2024, Midtown Manhattan was beginning another workday. People were heading to their offices, cars were moving through the streets, and outside the New York Hilton Midtown, UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson was walking toward an investor conference. He was 50 years old, a husband, a father, and in just moments, he would be dead. According to federal prosecutors, a masked gunman approached Thompson from behind and opened fire. Then, the gunman disappeared. Thompson was rushed for medical treatment, but he did not survive. Within hours, the NYPD began a massive manhunt. Detectives had surveillance footage, they had witnesses, they had digital and forensic evidence, but they did not have the shooter's name. 5 days later, they would. The man was Luigi Mangione, and what happened after his arrest would become one of the most closely watched criminal cases in America. For nearly 2 years, Mangione maintained his not guilty position. Then, on August 14, 2026, he walked into federal court in Manhattan and said something that changed the case forever. He admitted that he shot Brian Thompson, but that admission raises a much bigger question. Why was Thompson targeted in the first place, and how did police find the man responsible just 5 days after the killing? To answer that, we have to go back to the weeks before the shooting, because prosecutors say this did not begin on the sidewalk. It began with a plan. Luigi Mangione was 28 years old when he was arrested. Before December 2024, he was not publicly known as a violent criminal, but according to federal prosecutors, the months leading up to the shooting told a very different story. Investigators say Mangione began preparing for an attack, and Brian Thompson was not chosen at random. Thompson was the CEO of UnitedHealthcare. Prosecutors say Mangione traveled to New York more than a week before the shooting. He used false identification, he stayed at a hostel, and investigators say he conducted reconnaissance around Thompson's hotel and the conference venue. He was learning the location, watching the area, and preparing for December 4th. Then came another important detail. During his guilty plea, Mangione explained his own reasoning. He said he had suffered years of severe pain after a broken back. He said he had become deeply frustrated with the healthcare and insurance system, and he described experiences that, in his view, had convinced him the system had failed him. Then he took another step. Mangione admitted that he contacted UnitedHealthcare while pretending to be an investor. He claimed to represent a firm managing more than $50 billion. He wanted information about the company's investor conference, and he got an answer quickly. Mangione later pointed out the irony. He said he received the conference information within about an hour, faster than he had received responses to insurance claims. That may explain the anger he described, but it does not explain away what happened next. Because according to prosecutors, this was no longer simply frustration. It was preparation. And on the morning of December 4th, the plan became reality. Before sunrise, Mangione was already moving through Midtown Manhattan. According to prosecutors, he had traveled to New York more than a week earlier and had studied the area around Thompson's hotel and the investor conference. He knew where Thompson was expected to be. And on December 4th, 2024, he was waiting. At approximately 6:45 in the morning, Brian Thompson approached the hotel. According to prosecutors, Mangione came from behind him and fired. Thompson was fatally wounded. The shooting lasted only moments. Then, the gunman disappeared. What followed was a massive investigation. Police collected surveillance footage, interviewed witnesses, followed tips, and reconstructed the suspect's movements across the city. But investigators still needed one thing: a name. 5 days later, they had one, and it came from hundreds of miles away. December 9th, 2024. Luigi Mangione was inside a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. A customer recognized him from images released by police. Officers arrived. Mangione was arrested. According to authorities, police found identification under another name, a firearm, and other evidence they said connected him to the investigation. The manhunt was over, but the story was just beginning. Mangione quickly became one of the most controversial defendants in America. Some people condemned him, others portrayed him as a symbol of anger toward the healthcare system. But prosecutors focused on something much simpler. What happened on that Manhattan sidewalk? And they said the evidence showed a planned attack that would eventually lead to two separate criminal cases, one federal, one in New York State, and the stakes could not have been higher. The federal case once included charges that could have led to the death penalty, but in January 2026, those charges were dismissed. Two federal stalking charges remained. At the same time, New York continued its own murder case, one killing, two jurisdictions. Then, on August 14, 2026, Mangione pleaded guilty in federal court, and what he said next changed everything. Mangione admitted that he had tracked Thompson and traveled to New York to kill him. Then he said, "I shot Mr. Thompson in Manhattan, and he died." There was no federal jury, no verdict was needed. He had pleaded guilty. He also said his anger toward the healthcare system influenced his thinking, but he acknowledged that he knew the killing was illegal, and the story still wasn't over, because New York was waiting. Mangione's lawyers want the New York murder case dismissed. Their argument is double jeopardy. Can New York prosecute him again after the federal case? Prosecutors say yes. Now a judge must decide. Meanwhile, Mangione awaits federal sentencing on December 18, 2026. Prosecutors are seeking life imprisonment, but the judge will make the final decision, and whatever happens next. Brian Thompson never went home. Mangione became a symbol to some people, but behind the headlines was a real victim. Brian Thompson was a husband, a father, and his death changed his family forever. Mangione has described his anger toward healthcare, but anger does not justify murder. On August 14, 2026, he admitted in federal court that he shot Thompson. Now the courts will decide the consequences. But one thing cannot change. Brian Thompson never got another morning. What do you think? Was this a case of personal anger turning into violence, or was there something deeper behind Mangione's actions? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.